I never thought I'd be the one to destroy my family. Not on that cold October morning when the dew still clung to the grass and the clammy smell of fresh apple pie wafted through Grandma Rose's farmhouse. The sound of her body hitting the hardwood floor still haunts me. The hollow thud, the cracking of her hip, and my mother standing over her, hands still outstretched from the push. "Now you'll have no choice but to sign it over," Mom hissed. Grandma's eyes found mine in the doorway, filled with tears and betrayal, not at my mother's actions, but at the fact that I had seen everything. How could I have known that the yellow deed hidden in Grandma's antique secretary desk would change everything? Or that revealing its contents would make 16 family members turn their backs on the woman who raised me? The farmhouse had always smelled like cinnamon and old books. For 63 years, Grandma Rose had lived on those 87 acres in Willowbrook County. I spent every summer there from age 6. Until I left for college. Mom never understood the bond between Grandma and me. "She's just using you, Margaret," she'd say, pronouncing my name with that sharp edge she reserved for disappointments. I'd been Margaret since birth, but at the farm, I was Maggie, just Maggie. The name sounded different in Grandma's mouth-warmer, like it belonged to someone worthy of love without conditions. My mother, Diana Wells, had been the only daughter among 4 brothers, and she reminded everyone of this fact whenever possible. "I stayed while they all left," she'd say at family gatherings, wine glass clutched so tightly I thought it might shatter. "I gave up opportunities to be near this farm." The last word always came out bitter. Dad would squeeze her shoulder then, a gentle reminder to keep her composure. Before he died 3 years ago, he was the buffer between Mom and Grandma. Without him, their relationship degraded from cold politeness to open hostility. I found myself the unwilling mediator at age 42, driving the 30 minutes between their houses multiple times a week, always carrying messages they refused to deliver themselves. Grandma Rose had been declining slowly, arthritis claiming her once nimble fingers, her steps becoming more hesitant, but her mind remained sharp as the paring knife she used to peel apples in one continuous spiral. "Your mother was always in such a hurry," she told me one evening as we sat on the porch swing. "Never took the time to learn the right way to do things." I'd nodded, not wanting to take sides, even as I recognized the judgment in her words. The swing creaked rhythmically as fireflies began to appear in the darkening yard. "This land doesn't belong to those who don't love it," she added, more to herself than to me. I should have asked what she meant. Perhaps if I had, I could have prevented what happened next. Last spring, Mom started talking about retirement communities for Grandma. It's not safe for her to be alone on that farm anymore. She'd insist over our weekly lunch at Clayton's Diner. I'd pick at my club sandwich while she outlined brochures from Sunny Pines and Golden Horizons. "She's only 79, Mom," I'd counter, "and she has help. Mr. Jacobs from next door checks on her daily, and I'm there 3 times a week." Mom would purse her lips, creating those fine lines around her mouth that appeared more pronounced each year. "It's not about safety, is it?" I finally asked on the 4th consecutive lunch dominated by retirement home discussions. "It's about the farm." She'd set down her fork with precision. "The farm should stay in the family, Maggie. Once Mom can't manage it anymore, decisions need to be made. Practical decisions." I should have known then what was coming. The way Mom started visiting Grandma more often, bringing documents in manila folders, how she began referring to the property as our family farm in conversations, the increasing frequency of her calls to Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Finch, who had handled the family's legal matters for decades. I noticed, but I didn't connect the dots until it was too late. What kind of social worker misses the signs of elder pressure right in front of her? I've spent 15 years helping families navigate conflicts and protecting vulnerable people, yet I failed to protect the person who mattered most to me. When Mom asked me to join her for Sunday breakfast at Grandma's, saying she wanted us all to talk about the future, I agreed without hesitation. I'll never forget the date, October 17th, the day everything changed. I arrived early, just after 8 a.m., carrying a bag of fresh bagels from Mercer's Bakery downtown. Grandma's silver Buick was in its usual spot, but Mom's BMW was nowhere to be seen. The farmhouse door was unlocked as always. Grandma insisted that locks just keep out honest people despite my regular lectures on safety. I called out as I entered, expecting to find her at the kitchen table with her crossword puzzle and coffee. Instead, I heard raised voices from the study. "You've had it long enough," my mother was saying, her tone colder than I'd ever heard it. "It was never supposed to be yours in the first place." I froze in the hallway, the paper bag crinkling in my suddenly tight grip. "I'll tell you exactly what was in those documents she wanted signed. But first you need to understand what happened next." I stepped closer to the partially open door, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they would hear it. Through the crack, I could see Mom standing over Grandma, who sat in her leather desk chair, looking smaller than I remembered. "Your father promised it to me, not to you," Grandma said quietly. "After everything, this land was my compensation." Mom laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Compensation? Is that what you call stealing a man's inheritance?" She slapped a document down on the desk. "Sign it, Mom. Make things right." Grandma's hands remained folded in her lap. "I can't do that, Diana. This farm isn't just land, it's history." Mom leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper I had to strain to hear. "History you stole. Sign the transfer deed now." When Grandma shook her head, Mom's face transformed. The mask of concerned daughter fell away, revealing something I'd never seen before. Unfiltered rage. It happened so fast. Mom grabbed Grandma's arm, trying to force a pen into her hand. Grandma stood up, surprisingly spry, and pulled away. "Get out of my house," she commanded with dignity that made me proud. Then Mom placed both hands on Grandma's shoulders and pushed hard. Grandma stumbled backward, her hip catching the edge of the antique secretary desk, before she fell to the floor with that sickening thud. The sound unfroze me. I pushed the door open, the bagels dropping forgotten to the floor. "Mom, what are you doing?" I rushed to Grandma, kneeling beside her. Mom stood there, shocked at her own actions or perhaps at being caught. "She fell," she said automatically. I tried to catch her, but the lie hung hollow in the air between us. Grandma gripped my hand with surprising strength. "The bottom drawer," she whispered. "The locked one. The key is in my left cardigan pocket." Mom was already reaching for the phone, presumably to call 911, her face composed into a mask of concern. But I had seen the truth. As I helped Grandma to the sofa while we waited for the ambulance, I managed to slip the small brass key from her pocket. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes later. I remember checking my watch repeatedly, each minute stretching endlessly. They were gentle with Grandma, professional as they assessed her injury. "Likely a fractured hip," the female EMT said, her name tag reading Martinez, "common with falls at this age." I caught the pointed look Grandma gave me when the word fall was used. Mom hovered solicitously, the perfect concerned daughter. Now that we had an audience, "I'm going with her to the hospital," I told Mom firmly, leaving no room for argument. As the paramedics wheeled Grandma out, I saw her eyes flick toward the secretary desk. A silent message passed between us. "I'll meet you there," Mom replied, already reaching for her designer purse. "I just need to lock up here first." The chill that ran through me had nothing to do with the October air. I knew exactly what she was planning to do. As I climbed into the ambulance beside Grandma, the brass key felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Whatever was in that bottom drawer, Mom was desperate to find it. And I was now the only thing standing between her and whatever secret Grandma had been protecting. The hospital was a maze of white corridors and antiseptic smells. I stayed with Grandma through the x-rays that confirmed a fractured hip, through the admission process, through the pain medication that finally allowed her to relax. I held her weathered hand as she drifted in and out of sleep. "Don't let her find the deed," she murmured once, her eyes fluttering open momentarily before closing again. Mom arrived 2 hours later, her makeup freshly applied and carrying a vase of flowers that seemed excessive for the situation. "Any news?" she asked breezily, as if she hadn't been the cause of Grandma's injury. I updated her mechanically, watching her face for any sign that she'd found what she was looking for. But I couldn't read anything in her perfect composure. "You should go home. Get some rest," Mom suggested around dinner time. "I'll stay with her tonight." The thought of leaving Grandma alone with her made my stomach clench. "Actually, I've already called in to work for tomorrow. I'll stay." Something flickered across Mom's face, annoyance, calculation before she smiled thinly. "Well, I need to check on a few things at the farm then. Make sure everything's locked up properly." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. As soon as she left, I called Mr. Jacobs, Grandma's neighbor, and asked if he could check on the farmhouse that evening. Just drive by, make sure all looks well, I said vaguely. He agreed without question, having been Grandma's faithful friend for over 20 years. Then I settled into the uncomfortable hospital chair for the night, the key still safely in my pocket. The next 3 days passed in a blur of hospital routines, surgeon consultations, and Mom's increasingly transparent attempts to get me to leave Grandma's side. The surgery to repair Grandma's hip was scheduled for Thursday morning. "You can't stay here forever, Margaret," Mom snapped on Wednesday night, her patience finally wearing thin. "I'm perfectly capable of looking after my own mother." I looked directly into her eyes, so similar to mine in color but lacking any warmth. "Like you did on Sunday morning?" I asked quietly. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "That was an accident," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. We both knew what I had seen. The question hanging between us was what I would do about it. The surgery went well, but recovery would be long. Grandma would need rehabilitation, home health care modifications to the farmhouse. As we discussed these details with Dr. Williams, Mom interjected, "Actually, we've been considering a retirement community. This might be the right time to make that transition." The casual way she said we made my blood boil. Dr. Williams looked between us, sensing the tension. "Well, there's time to decide all that. For now, Mrs. Peterson needs at least 2 weeks here before any discharge planning." Mom's smile tightened. As the doctor left, Grandma beckoned me closer. "You need to go to the farm," she whispered. "Today, before she does." I nodded, squeezing her hand gently. I was thinking the same thing. I drove to the farm with my heart pounding, wondering what I would find. Had Mom already ransacked the place, looking for whatever important document was hidden in that locked drawer? The farmhouse looked peaceful as I pulled up, golden afternoon light making the white clapboard shine. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed at first glance. I went straight to the study, to the secretary desk that had belonged to my great-grandmother. The bottom drawer was still locked. With shaking hands, I inserted the brass key. It turned with a satisfying click. Inside lay a single manila folder, yellowed with age. The label read simply, "Peterson Farm, 1960. I opened it, and 16 pages of history spilled into my lap. What I found inside would change everything I thought I knew about my family. The documents told a story very different from the one I'd grown up hearing. The farm hadn't been in my grandfather's family for generations, as Mom had always claimed. It had belonged to Grandma's family, the Caldwells. My grandfather, John Peterson, had married into it. The original deed from 1912 showed the property belonging to Edward Caldwell, Grandma's father. A handwritten letter from my grandfather to Grandma, dated 1959, acknowledged that he had gambled away his own family's property and apologized for trying to control your family's farm. Most shocking was a document dated 1960, after my grandfather's death, showing that he had tried to transfer ownership to his brothers behind Grandma's BACA transfer that was invalidated because the property wasn't legally his to give. There was a photo, too, of a young Grandma Rose, standing proudly in front of the farmhouse, a toddler, my mother on her hip. On the back was written, "Rose and Diana, Caldwell Farm, 1962, Caldwell, not Peterson." Everything Mom had told me about our family history was a lie. The farm had never been Peterson property to begin with. It had always belonged to Grandma's side of the family, and she had been the rightful owner since her father passed it to her upon marriage. No wonder she had been so resistant to Mom's pressure to sign it back to the family. It had never left her family at all. I carefully photographed each document with my phone, then returned everything to the drawer except for the invalidated transfer attempt. That paper I folded and put in my purse. I would need proof when I confronted Mom. Back at the hospital the next day, I found Mom already there, sitting beside Grandma with a strained smile. "Good news," she announced as I entered. "I've spoken with Golden Horizons, and they have a rehabilitation unit that can take Mom directly from the hospital. No need to worry about modifying the farmhouse at all." Grandma's eyes met mine, pleading silently. I took a deep breath. "Actually, Mom, we need to talk about the farm." Her smile froze. "Not now, Margaret. We're focusing on Mother's recovery. I pulled up a chair, forming a triangle between us. Now is exactly the right time. I found the documents in Grandma's desk. The color drained from Mom's face. You had no right to snoop through private papers, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The farm was never Peterson property, I said, loud enough for Grandma to hear clearly. It's always been Caldwell land, Grandma's family land. Mom's eyes darted to Grandma, who was watching with an expression of tired vindication. That's ancient history, Mom dismissed with a wave of her hand. Daddy always intended, I cut her off, something I'd rarely done in 42 years. Grandpa gambled away his own family property. He had no claim to the Caldwell farm. The document you've been pressuring Grandma to sign, it's to transfer property that has always legally been hers, not ours. I pulled out the folded paper from my purse. He tried this once before, in 1960. It didn't work then either. Mom stared at the document like it was a snake about to strike. In that moment, I realized I was seeing my mother clearly for the first time. You pushed her, I said quietly, the words hanging in the sterile hospital air. You pushed a 17-9-year-old woman because she wouldn't give you property that was never yours to claim. Mom stood abruptly, gathering her designer coat and purse. I don't have to listen to these accusations. She fell. It was an accident. Her voice cracked on the last word. Grandma, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. It wasn't an accident, Diana, and it wasn't the first time you've tried to take what isn't yours. Mom froze at the door, her back to us. This conversation is over. I'll check back tomorrow when you're both thinking more clearly. And then she was gone, the sharp clicking of her heels fading down the hallway. I sat with Grandma in silence for several minutes. Finally, she reached for my hand. I should have told you years ago, she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in days. After your grandfather died, his brothers came around, claiming he'd promised them the farm. I had a 2-year-old daughter and a mortgage to pay. They tried everything: intimidation, legal threats, even attempting to forge documents. She squeezed my hand. Your mother grew up watching that battle. Somewhere along the way, she started believing their side of the story. I thought about all the times Mom had spoken bitterly about the farm, about Grandma's stubbornness in refusing to sell. It had never been about the money, we were comfortable financially, but about a decades-old grudge based on a false narrative. What do we do now? I asked. Grandma's eyes, so like my own, held a determination that belied her fragile physical state. Now, she said, we protect what's ours. I nodded, already formulating a plan. What I couldn't have anticipated was how quickly Mom would escalate matters, or how many allies she'd already lined up in her quest to claim the Caldwell farm. By Sunday evening, exactly 1 week after the incident, my phone was ringing constantly with calls from uncles, cousins, and family friends I barely knew. Mom had been busy, spinning a tale of Grandma's incompetence and my undue influence. According to her version, I was manipulating an elderly woman with dementia to keep family property from its rightful heirs. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. Uncle Robert, Mom's eldest brother, called as I was driving home from the hospital. Maggie, what's this Diana's telling us about Rose hiding property documents? His voice boomed through my car speakers. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. It's not what Mom's making it out to be. Uncle Robert, the farm was never Peterson property. It's always been Caldwell land, Grandma's family. There was a long pause. That's not how your grandfather told it, he finally said. John always said that farm would come back to his brothers after Rose was gone. I felt a chill despite the car heater. Did he also mention that he lost his own family's land to gambling debts? Another pause, longer this time. I think you and I need to have a conversation in person, he said finally. This Friday. I'll be in town for a meeting anyway, I agreed, not knowing then that this meeting would be the first step toward exposing a 50-year-old family conspiracy. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in family manipulation. Mom rallied her brothers Robert, Thomas, David, and James, all of whom had grown up hearing their father's version of the farm's history. They closed ranks quickly, united by the prospect of valuable property. Multiple Peterson cousins began calling Grandma in her hospital room, their concern for her health thinly veiling questions about the farm's future. One afternoon, I arrived to find a man in a suit sitting beside her bed. He left hurriedly when I entered, but not before I glimpsed the business card he left behind. Everett Wilson, elder law attorney, not Mr. Finch, who had handled Grandma's affairs for decades, but a stranger hired by Mom and my uncles. They're trying to claim I'm incompetent, Grandma informed me calmly after he left. Apparently, I'm suffering from delusions about the farm's ownership. Despite everything, a small smile played at the corner of her mouth. Good thing we have the documents to prove otherwise. I wasn't smiling. Legal battles could drag on for years, draining Grandma's resources and health. We needed allies of our own, and fast. That evening, I called Sandra Mitchell, a colleague from the Department of Social Services who specialized in elder abuse cases. I need your advice, professionally and as a friend, I began. My grandmother is being pressured to sign over her property by family members who have no legal claim to it. Sandra's response was immediate and firm. Document everything, Maggie, times, dates, names, and get a good elder law attorney, not just a family lawyer. She paused before adding, and Maggie, I'm so sorry you're going through this. The meeting with Uncle Robert on Friday changed everything. I arrived at Clayton's diner armed with copies of all the documents I'd found, including the original deed showing the property as Caldwell land. Robert looked older than I remembered, his Peterson features the same sharp nose and chin, as Mom Moore pronounced with age. You look like your father, he said gruffly, as I slid into the booth across from him. I took it as a compliment. Dad had been a good man. Let's skip the small talk, I replied. I want to understand why everyone is so determined to take Grandma's property when it legally belongs to her. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. It's complicated, Maggie. Family history always is. What Uncle Robert told me over the next hour shattered any remaining illusions I had about my family. Grandpa John had indeed married Grandma Rose, partly for her family's prosperous farm, after losing his own inheritance to gambling. When he died unexpectedly in 1960, he left behind not only a young widow and child but substantial debts. The brothers, my uncles, they felt entitled to the Caldwell property, Robert explained. They'd been promised shares by John if they covered his debts. He looked down at his coffee cup. They forged documents. Maggie tried to make it look like the farm had been transferred to John personally before his death. My stomach lurched. And Mom, what's her role in all this? Robert's expression turned pained. Diana grew up hearing one version of the story. By the time she was old enough to understand, she'd already decided that Rose had stolen her birthright. I pushed the copies of the documents across the table. These tell a different story. Robert examined them silently, his face growing more troubled with each page. When he looked up, his eyes were damp. I always suspected, but I never knew for certain. He tapped the invalidated transfer document. This matches my father's handwriting perfectly. He and my uncles did try to steal the farm. He seemed to age another decade. As we sat there, Diana doesn't know any of this, does she? She truly believes Rose took what belonged to John. I thought about Mom's face when she pushed Grandma. The absolute conviction in her anger. She believes it, I confirmed. But that doesn't excuse what she did. Uncle Robert straightened his shoulders, a decision visibly forming. I won't be part of this anymore. Not now that I've seen these documents. He looked me directly in the eyes. What do you need from me, Maggie? I hadn't expected this turn, hadn't dared hope for an ally from the Peterson side. I need you to tell the truth, Uncle Robert. To Mom, to your brothers, to anyone who will listen. Grandma shouldn't have to fight this battle again at her age. He nodded solemnly. I'll do more than that. I'll testify if needed about what I know of the forged documents. As we parted, he hugged me awkwardly. You're doing the right thing, Maggie. No matter what comes next, remember that. What came next was worse than I could have imagined. Mom, perhaps sensing that her narrative was unraveling, escalated dramatically. On Monday morning, I received a call from the hospital. Grandma had been discharged not to rehabilitation as planned, but to Golden Horizons retirement community. Mom had somehow convinced the hospital social worker that this had been the agreed-upon plan. By the time I arrived at Golden Horizons, Grandma was already installed in a small room, looking disoriented and angry. They wouldn't listen to me, she said the moment I entered. Diana brought papers she said were from Dr. Williams. Mom was nowhere to be seen. but she had left her mark. On the admission paperwork, under cognitive status, someone had checked moderate impairment. I immediately requested a meeting with the facility director, a tall woman named Ms. Patel, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. My grandmother was admitted under false pretenses, I explained, showing her the hospital discharge papers. She has no cognitive impairment, and there was no family agreement to place her here. Ms. Patel reviewed the documents carefully. I see several discrepancies, she acknowledged. However, Mrs. Peterson was admitted under her daughter's authority as next of kin and healthcare proxy. I felt the blood drained from my face. Healthcare proxy? That's impossible. Grandma appointed me as her proxy years ago. Ms. Patel's expression grew concerned as she showed me a healthcare proxy form dated just 3 weeks earlier, with Mom's signature where mine should have been. I recognized Mr. Wilson's notary stamp at the bottom. This is forged, I said flatly. My grandmother would never have signed this. If you're alleging elder abuse and document forgery, I'm obligated to report this to Adult Protective Services, Ms. Patel said carefully. I nodded. A plan forming. Please do. In fact, I'll call them myself. I work for the department. The look of surprise on her face was worth it. You're a social worker. I nodded again. 15 years with DSS, and I know exactly what my mother is doing. By that afternoon, I had filed a formal complaint with spoken with Grandma's primary care physician to document her cognitive clarity, and called Mr. Finch, her longtime lawyer. The pieces were falling into place, but Mom still had one advantage: physical possession of the farm while Grandma was trapped in Golden Horizons. I needed to get back into that house to secure all of the original documents before they could disappear. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Mom called that evening, her voice artificially sweet. Margaret, I've been thinking. We should go through some of Mom's things at the farm, decide what she needs at Golden Horizons. It was a transparent attempt to gauge my reaction to Grandma's placement. I played along. That's a good idea. How about tomorrow morning? I could almost hear her calculating, wondering if I was surrendering or planning something. Perfect. 10 o'clock, she confirmed. I agreed, already texting Uncle Robert about my plan. He responded immediately. I'll meet you there at 9:30, bringing James. He needs to see the truth, too. Uncle James was the youngest brother, the one closest to Mom in age. His support could be crucial. I arrived at the farm the next morning to find both uncles already there, standing awkwardly on the porch. Uncle James looked skeptical, arms crossed defensively. Robert's been telling me some wild stories, Maggie, he said by way of greeting, about forged documents and the farm being Caldwell property all along. I unlocked the door with the key Grandma had given me years ago. Not stories, Uncle James. Facts, and I'm going to show you the proof. Inside, the house felt empty without Grandma's presence, though it had only been a week since she'd lived there. I led them straight to the study, to the secretary desk with its locked bottom drawer. As I reached for my key, noticed something wrong. The lock had been forced, the wood around it splintered. My heart sank as I pulled open the drawer. Empty. She beat us to it, I said flatly. Uncle Robert swore under his breath. Uncle James looked between us, confused. If the documents are gone, how can you prove anything? I pulled out my phone, opening the photo gallery. Because I took pictures of everything. I handed him the phone, watching his face as he swiped through the evidence. His expression changed from skepticism to shock to something like grief. Dad tried to steal this place, he asked Robert, who nodded grimly. And we've been helping Diana try to do the same thing. He handed the phone back to me, his decision made. What do you need us to do, Maggie? I smiled for the first time in days. I need you both to come with me to Golden Horizons. It's time for a family meeting, but this time, with all the facts on the table. Mom arrived at the farm at precisely 10 a.m., dressed immaculately, as always. Her composure faltered when she saw her brother's cars in the driveway. When she entered the kitchen and found the three of us sitting at the table, she froze. What's going on here? The familiar sharpness had returned to her voice. Uncle Robert spoke first, his tone gentle but firm. Diana, we need to talk about the farm, and about what you've been doing to Mother. Mom's gaze darted between her brothers before settling on me, accusation clear in her eyes. I see Margaret has been busy spreading her version of events. I placed my phone on the table, screen up. Not my version, Mom. The documented truth. We know you took the papers from the desk, but I have copies of everything. The original deed showing Caldwell ownership, Grandpa's letter admitting he gambled away his own property, the invalidated transfer he tried to pull off after his death. Those are forgeries, Mom said automatically, but her voice lacked conviction. Uncle James shook his head sadly. No, Diana. Dad's handwriting on that invalidated transfer is unmistakable. I compared it to the letters he wrote me that I've kept all these years. He reached across the table, trying to take her hand, but she pulled away. We've all been operating under a false family history. The farm was never Peterson property. It has always belonged to Mother's family. Mom's face contorted with an emotion I couldn't name, rage perhaps, or the pain of a lifelong belief crumbling. That's not possible. Daddy always said. Uncle Robert cut her off gently. Dad lied, Diana. He lied to his brothers, and they perpetuated that lie to us. Mom's next move shocked even me. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. If that's true, then Mother has been mentally incompetent for years, living in a fantasy world where her family owned that property. She thrust the phone toward us, showing an application open on the screen. I've already filed for guardianship. The hearing is next week. Once the court sees how delusional she is about the farm's history, they'll understand why she needs supervision. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. Mom was doubling down, willing to have her own mother declared incompetent rather than admit she was wrong. Uncle Robert looked physically ill. Uncle James stood up so abruptly his chair nearly toppled. That's enough, Diana. This has gone too far. I gathered my composure, years of professional training kicking in. Actually, Mom, there's already an APS investigation open. I filed it yesterday, after discovering you forged Grandma's healthcare proxy. I held her gaze steadily. The next step is a police report for the elder abuse and document theft. But it doesn't have to go that far. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. What are you saying? I laid it out clearly. Withdraw the guardianship petition. Sign a statement acknowledging the farm's true ownership. Help Grandma return home with proper support for her recovery. Do those things, and we can keep this within the family. The choice hung between us, bride, versus consequences. Mom left without giving an answer, her brothers following to continue the conversation privately. I stayed behind, walking through Grandma's house, trying to imagine her returning here to recover. The forced lock on the desk would need repair. The house would need modifications for her limited mobility. As I entered the kitchen, my phone rang. Zandra, from DSS. Maggie, I've been assigned your grandmother's APS case, she said, without preamble. Conflict of interest waived given the circumstances. I need you to know that this is bigger than you initially reported. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Her voice lowered. The retirement facility reported that the admission paperwork included a DNR order, allegedly signed by your grandmother. The staff physician flagged it because it contradicted what your grandmother told him during her admission assessment. A do not resuscitate order. My hands began to shake. This was no longer about property. It was about Grandma's life. The order is fake, I said with absolute certainty. Grandma and I discussed end-of-life wishes last year after Dad died. She wants full intervention. Sandra's voice was grim. I suspected as much. Maggie, this crosses into criminal territory. Falsifying medical directives is a felony. I closed my eyes, leaning against the kitchen counter. What do I do, Sandra? Her answer was immediate. Go to the police. Today, before something happens that can't be undone. I thought of Mom's face when she pushed Grandma. The cold calculation as she built her case for guardianship. I'll go right now, I promised. As I locked up the farmhouse, I realized I had passed a point of no return. The next time I saw my mother, it would likely be across a courtroom. The Willowbrook County Sheriff's Office was housed in a modern building that seemed out of place among the town's predominantly historical architecture. Deputy Carson took my statement, her expression growing more serious as I detailed the events of the past 2 weeks. I showed her the photographs of the documents, the splintered lock on the desk, the forged healthcare proxy, and the falsified DNR order that Sandra had sent me. I need to be clear, Miss Peterson, she said after I finished. You're alleging elder abuse, document forgery, filing of false medical directives, and attempted exploitation of an elderly person, all committed by your mother, against your grandmother. I nodded. The reality of what I was doing, hitting me fully. Yes, and I'd like to press charges on my grandmother's behalf. Deputy Carson assigned Detective Maurice to the case. He was older, with kind eyes that had seen too much, and a notebook that never seemed to leave his hand. We'll need to interview your grandmother, he explained. Establish her cognitive status and get her version of events. I agreed, relieved when he offered to meet us at Golden Horizons rather than bringing Grandma to the station. As we walked to our cars, he paused. Ms. Peterson, Maggie, cases like this, family against family, they get messy. Are you prepared for what comes next? I thought about Grandma's eyes when she fell, about the forged DNR, about 50 years of lies that had warped my mother's understanding of her own history. I'm prepared to protect my grandmother, I said simply. Whatever that takes. Detective Morris and I arrived at Golden Horizons to find the place in an uproar. Mom had been there an hour earlier, attempting to have Grandma transferred to another facility in the next county. Ms. Patel had refused, citing the ongoing APS investigation. Your mother became quite aggressive, she told me privately. We had to ask her to leave the premises. Grandma was in her room, sitting in a wheelchair by the window, her face lighting up when she saw me. Her relief at seeing Detective Maurice was even more pronounced. Finally, she said, straightening her shoulders, someone who can put a stop to this madness. Over the next hour, she provided a clear, detailed account of the events leading up to her injury, the years of pressure from Mom about the farm, and her concerns about the forged documents. Detective Maurice recorded everything, occasionally asking clarifying questions but mostly letting Grandma tell her story in her own words. Mrs. Peterson, he said when she had finished, do you feel safe here at Golden Horizons? Grandma considered the question carefully. The staff has been kind, but no, I don't feel safe. My daughter has too much control here. I want to go home to my farm. Detective Morris nodded, making a note. We can arrange for an emergency protective order that would bar your daughter from contacting you or entering your property. Would that help you feel secure? Grandma's eyes filled with tears for the first time since this ordeal began. Yes, she whispered. That would help enormously. As Detective Maurice stepped out to make some calls, Grandma gripped my hand. I never wanted it to come to this, Maggie. Diana is still my daughter, despite everything. The mix of strength and heartbreak in her voice nearly undid me. I know, Grandma, but she crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. The following week was a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The emergency protective order was granted immediately. A PS expedited their investigation, confirming the findings of elder abuse and financial exploitation. Uncle Robert and Uncle James provided sworn statements about the family history and the forged documents. Mr. Finch presented Grandma's legitimate legal documents, including her healthcare directive naming me as proxy and her will leaving the farm to my information. Mom had never known. Each revelation seemed to fuel Mom's desperate attempts to maintain control. She filed motions to dismiss the protective order, hired a new attorney when Mr. Wilson quit the case, and continued to insist that Grandma was mentally incompetent. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for Tuesday, October 31st, Halloween, appropriately enough, given the masks that would be removed that day. I helped Grandma dress in her most dignified outfit, a navy suit she had worn to school board meetings during her 40 years as a teacher. Her silver hair was neatly styled, her posture as straight as her healing hip would allow in the wheelchair. Ready? I asked as we prepared to enter the courtroom. She reached for my hand. I've been ready for 50 years, Maggie. It's time the truth came out. We were met at the courthouse door by Uncle Robert, Uncle James, and to my surprise, Uncles Thomas and David as well. All four Peterson brothers, united at last in support of their mother, rather than their father's false claims. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Word had spread through Willowbrook County about the Peterson-Caldwell farm dispute. Neighbors, former students of Grandma's, even Mr. Jacobs with his weathered farmer's fasol, had come to show support. Mom sat at the respondent's table with her attorney, a severe-looking woman in an expensive suit. She didn't turn when we entered, her back rigid with tension. Judge Harriman, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, called the court to order. "We're here in the matter of Peterson versus Peterson, petition for guardianship," she announced. "Before we begin, I should note that I've received the AP's investigation report and the police detective's findings. Mrs. Diana Peterson, are you certain you wish to proceed with this petition given the evidence before the court?" Mom's attorney leaned close, whispering urgently, but Mom shook her head. "Yes, Your Honor, we wish to proceed." Judge Harriman's expression revealed nothing. "Very well. As the petitioner, you may present your case." What followed was a masterclass in how not to seek guardianship. Mom's attorney presented a narrative of Grandma as a confused elderly woman, clinging to delusions about family property, resistant to necessary care, and unable to manage her affairs. She introduced the reports from Mr. Wilson and the physician who had briefly seen Grandma at Golden Horizons. But her case began to unravel during cross-examination. Mr. Finch, representing Grandma, methodically exposed the inconsistencies, the convenient timing of the cognitive concerns, and the lack of any prior documentation of confusion or memory issues. When it was our turn, Mr. Finch didn't call Grandma first as expected. Instead, he called Uncle Robert to the stand. "Mr. Peterson, could you tell the court about your understanding of the farm's ownership when you were growing up?" Uncle Robert straightened his tie nervously. "We were always told it was Peterson land, that our father had inherited it, and that Rose, our mother, was trying to steal it from the family after his death." Mr. Finch nodded. "And when did you learn differently?" Uncle Robert looked directly at Mom as he answered. "Last Friday, when my niece Maggie showed me the original deeds and my father's own letters admitting the truth. The farm was always Caldwell land. Our father married into it, then tried to steal it through forged documents when he died." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Harriman called for order, her gaze sharpening as she watched Mom's reaction. Uncle James testified next, confirming Robert's account and adding details about the pressure Mom had been putting on Grandma for years. Then came Sandra from APS, Detective Maurice, and Ms. Patel from Golden Horizons, each adding another piece to the puzzle of manipulation and abuse. When Mr. Finch finally called Grandma to testify, the courtroom fell silent. She wheeled herself to the witness stand, refusing help, her dignity intact despite everything. For the next 30 minutes, she told her story not just of the recent events, but of the 50-year battle to protect her family's legacy from those who would steal it through lies. Her voice never wavered, her recollection of dates and details impeccable. When she finished, even Judge Harriman seemed moved. "Mrs. Peterson," the judge addressed Grandma directly, "given everything that has happened, what outcome are you seeking today?" Grandma's answer was simple but powerful. "I want to go home, Your Honor, to the farm that has been in my family for over 100 years. I want to live out my days in peace, knowing that when I'm gone, the land will pass to someone who loves it, as my father did, as I do." Her eyes found mine briefly. "And I want my daughter to get the help she needs to understand the truth about our family." The compassion in those last words, after everything Mom had done, demonstrated why Grandma had been beloved by generations of students and neighbors. It wasn't just her integrity they admired, but her capacity for forgiveness. Judge Harriman took only 15 minutes to reach her decision. When she returned to the bench, her expression was resolute. "Petition for guardianship denied," she announced firmly. "Furthermore, I am extending the emergency protective order for 6 months, during which time Diana Peterson is prohibited from contacting Rose Peterson except through counsel and is barred from entering the property known as Caldwell Farm." She fixed Mom with a stern gaze. "Mrs. Peterson, I strongly suggest you review the evidence presented today and reconsider your position. The district attorney's office will be receiving the police report regarding the forged documents and false medical directives. Cooperation now could influence how those matters proceed." Mom remained motionless, staring straight ahead as the implications of the judge's words sank in. She faced potential criminal charges unless she began to acknowledge the truth. As we left the courthouse, surrounded by well-wishers, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and sorrow. We had won. Grandma was going home, her ownership of the farm legally reaffirmed, her safety ensured by the protective order. But the cost had been a complete rupture with my mother, a woman I had spent my life trying to please despite her impossible standards. Outside on the courthouse steps, Uncle Robert approached, looking uncomfortable in his formal suit. Maggie, my brothers and we'd like to make this right somehow. We're pooling some money to help with home modifications for Mother, for her recovery. The gesture, unexpected and genuine, brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, I managed. That would mean so much to her. Perhaps healing was possible, at least with some branches of the family tree. Grandma moved home the following week. After modifications to the farmhouse had been completed, a bedroom on the main floor, grab bars in the bathroom, a ramp to the front porch, I took a leave of absence from work to stay with her during the initial recovery period. The farm in autumn was beautiful, the maple trees aflame with color, the apple orchard heavy with late-season fruit. We settled into a routine: physical therapy exercises in the morning, visits from home health nurses, quiet afternoons on the porch watching the season change. Grandma's strength returned gradually, her determination never wavering. By Thanksgiving, she was using a walker instead of the wheelchair, insisting on supervising the preparation of her traditional recipes even if she couldn't stand for long periods. Uncle Robert and his wife hosted Thanksgiving dinner that year, neutral territory where the family could gather without the weight of the farm's history pressing down on everyone. Mom didn't attend. I heard through Uncle James that she had begun therapy, a condition of her plea agreement with the district attorney. She had avoided jail time by admitting to the forgeries and agreeing to psychological treatment, community service, and restitution. The criminal consequence seemed appropriate to the crime, but the personal damage remained immeasurable. I sent her a card at Thanksgiving, a tentative olive branch. It came back unopened. Some wounds would take longer to heal than Grandma's hip, if they ever healed at all. Winter settled over the farm, snow blanketing the fields and orchard in pristine white. Grandma and I developed new traditions: movie nights, weekly baking projects, long conversations about family history. Now unclouded by deception, she began recording her memories in a journal, preserving the true story of the Caldwell farm for future generations. I should have done this years ago, she told me one evening as we sat by the fireplace. Secrets fester, Maggie. The truth might be painful, but hiding it only causes more pain in the long run. I thought of Mom, living alone with her bitterness and broken narratives, and felt a renewed determination to reach out despite her rejection. The opportunity came at Christmas. I had sent Mom another card, this time with a letter inviting her to meet on neutral ground, the small park in town, where she had once pushed me on the swings as a child. I didn't really expect her to come, so when I saw her sitting on a bench, bundled against the December chill, my step faltered. She looked older, diminished somehow without her usual perfect appearance. She didn't stand when I approached, but she didn't leave either. I sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. Thank you for coming, I said simply. She nodded once, her gaze fixed on the empty playground. How is she? The question surprised me the first time she had asked about Grandma's well-being, rather than her competency or the farm. She's doing well, I answered cautiously. Getting stronger every day. Mom nodded again, her gloved hands tightly clasped in her lap. My therapist says I've been living with a distorted view of reality for most of my life. The words seemed rehearsed but sincere, that I internalized a narrative from my father and uncles that wasn't true. I waited, letting her continue at her own pace. I'm not ready to see her yet, Mom finally said, or to apologize. I'm still processing everything. It wasn't the reconciliation I had hoped for, but it was honest, perhaps the first truly honest exchange we'd had in years. When you're ready, I told her. She listened. She's always been willing to listen. We sat in silence for a few minutes more before parting ways, the first fragile bridge extending across the chasm between us. Spring brought renewal to the farm: green shoots in Grandma's garden, blossoms in the orchard, fresh paint on the farmhouse exterior. Grandma had progressed from walker to cane, moving slowly but steadily around her beloved property. I had returned to work part-time but continued living at the farm, finding unexpected peace in the rhythm of rural life. In March, Grandma called me into the study, where the secretary desk now stood repaired, its bottom drawer sporting a new, more secure lock. I've been thinking, she said, settling into her leather chair. It's time to make some changes to the farm's legal status. My heart skipped. wondering if she was considering selling after all the conflict. Instead, she pushed a document across the desk to me. I'm establishing a trust to protect the farm for generations to come. The Caldwell Peterson Family Trust. The document outlined her vision. The farm would remain intact, never to be sold or divided. Upon her death, I would become trustee, with provisions for future generations to take on that role. Agricultural easements would preserve the land from development. Most surprising was the beneficiary list, not just me, but all Peterson family members who wished to maintain a connection to the property. Even Mom, I asked, unable to hide my shock. Grandma's smile was sad but determined. Even Diana. This farm has been a source of conflict for too long. I wanted to become a place of healing, instead. The wisdom of her approach humbled me. After everything she had endured, her response was not to exclude but to include, not to punish but to preserve. Summer marked 1 year since the conflict began. Grandma celebrated her 80th birthday in July with a party at the farm, the first time many family members had gathered there since the court case. Uncle Robert and his brothers came with their families. Old neighbors and former students stopped by throughout the day. Even Mr. Finch attended, bringing a bound copy of all the original Caldwell Farm documents, now properly preserved and protected. Mom didn't come, but she sent a card store-bought, with a brief message, but a gesture nonetheless. Grandma placed it prominently on the mantel, alongside cards from everyone else. "Progress," she said when she caught me looking at it. "Slow, but progress." The true healing began in August, when Mom finally agreed to meet with Grandma. I arranged the meeting at my apartment, neutral territory, and prepared to mediate if necessary. They sat across from each other, these two stubborn women who shared the same determined jawline and fierce intelligence. "I've been seeing a therapist," Mom began awkwardly. "She's helping me understand how I distorted things." Grandma nodded encouragingly. "And I've been thinking about what really happened after Dad died," Mom continued. "How his brothers came around, telling me stories about the farm being stolen from my inheritance." Her voice broke slightly. "I believed them. For 50 years, I believed them, instead of you." Grandma reached across the space between them, not quite touching Mom but offering the possibility. "They were the adults, Diana. You were a child who'd lost her father. Of course you believed them." The conversation that followed was halting, painful at times, but crucial. Mom acknowledged the harm she had caused. Grandma admitted that her silence about the farm's history had contributed to the misunderstanding. They didn't emerge as friends, exactly, but perhaps as family members who could begin to see each other clearly for the first time. When Mom mentioned she had received the trust documents, Grandma explained her vision for the farm's future. "I never wanted to exclude you, Diana. I only wanted to protect what has always been ours, all of ours." Mom nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "The Caldwell Peterson Family Trust," she said softly, both names together. It was, perhaps, the first step toward a new narrative, one built on truth rather than deception. Today marks 13 months since that cold October morning when I witnessed my mother push my grandmother. The farm is thriving, the apple harvest was abundant, the trust documents are finalized, and Grandma walks the property daily with only occasional use of her cane. Mom visits once a month, these visits still awkward but gradually warming. She and I have our own weekly dinners, rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. The Peterson brothers have become regular visitors to the farm, helping with maintenance and learning its history from Grandma's perspective. Family wounds heal slowly, but they do heal when truth and forgiveness are applied consistently. I still live at the farm, having discovered an unexpected love for the land that has been in my family for generations. Grandma has been teaching me the property's rhythms and secrets, where the best apples grow, how to predict frost from the behavior of the birds, which wildflowers bloom first in spring. "You have Caldwell eyes," she told me recently as we watched the sunset from the porch swing. "Always looking for the beauty in things, not just their value." It was the highest compliment she could give, and I treasured it. The farm will be my responsibility someday, not as an inheritance to profit from, but as a legacy to protect. I find peace in that knowledge, in the continuity it represents. If you're listening to this and something about it resonates, you've been told a family story that doesn't quite add up, if you've felt pressure to surrender something that rightfully belongs to you, if you've witnessed wrongdoing and struggled with whether to speak up, know that you're not alone. The truth has a weight to it, a substance that lies lack. Trust that feeling in your gut when something seems wrong. Document everything. Find allies who will stand with you, and remember that sometimes revealing uncomfortable truths is the greatest act of love you can offer your family, even when it doesn't feel that way. Leave a comment below if you've faced a similar situation, subscribe to hear more stories like this one, and share this with someone who might need to hear that standing up for what's right is worth it, even when it's hard. I'm Maggie Peterson, recording from the porch swing of Caldwell Farm, where the truth finally set us all free.